Welcome into Pro Football Today. It is time for the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio after this Monday night doubleheader. Now, the late slate just wrapped up. We've got the Chargers fell short to the Cardinals, 17-15, and as expected, a bit of a slower game, but actually not a slower game, low scoring, but a very fast game. We had some things going where we didn't even realize that the clock was going to continue to roll that quickly. As for the other game, 41-31 was the victory for the Ravens over the Buccaneers, but a number of injuries took place in that game. I mean, starting in the first half, honestly, Flowers got banged up for a minute, Humphrey got banged up for a minute, Evans with the hamstring, and then unfortunately a pretty significant leg injury for Chris Godwin. We're seeing reports that for Godwin it could be a dislocated ankle per the Bucs. So a couple of things that we got to touch base on, not only between these two games, but around the league. So where do you want to start, Tom? Do we start with Ravens versus Bucs, or do we start with Chargers versus Cardinals?
Let's start with Chargers Cardinals, just because I think this game, it's pretty easy, pretty straightforward of what we saw. The under hit, Cardinals won. They were underdogs, so they actually went on the money line. Connor continues to be awesome, 19-101 on the ground. He had another 51 in the air. Trey McBride, solid game, 51 in the air from him. Herbert, 349 in the air. He had no passing touchdowns with 350 yards when his prop was sitting at 197 or 202, whatever it was. A great game from Herbert. Literally his best of the year. I spoke about Herbert under 18 and a half completions because I just did not expect this to be a passing game for them, and he flew past that number. Dobbins did hit under 17 and a half attempts, as I spoke about. And again, this game flew by just in terms of time. As you said, it was a short game, a quick game, because they like to bleed the clock. I said this, the Chargers, they're last in the league when it comes to 32.7 seconds per play. That means when they have the ball, they are bringing it down to the final few seconds every time. So they move the ball with Herbert, and then they just kick field goals because they're not converting in the red zone. And Quentin Johnston was out tonight, and he was one of their big targets over the first few weeks, getting those touchdowns. So maybe that's something to point out moving forward. Like, I don't want to sit here and say, like, oh, kicker props for Cameron Dicker are the way to go for the Chargers. But ultimately, if they can't convert in the red zone and they're actually effective at moving the ball, that might be it. The Cardinals are what they are. They come away with the win. It's Murray. I think it's still going to be James Conner. Marvin Harrison Jr. will have his big weeks. We can kind of move on from this game. That's really it.
Yeah, I think you put the perfect bow on that one. I mean, the Chargers are a tale to still be told, honestly. 34 minutes of offensive time versus the Cardinals' 25 minutes of offensive time. And just to stack to what you mentioned when it comes to efficiency in the most important ways, third down efficiency for the Chargers, 43%. For the Cardinals, it wasn't even better. It was 29%, wildly enough, but that's just third downs. Outside of that, looking at the red zone, 0 conversions for the Chargers, and then 50% when it came to the Cardinals. So there's nothing to add when it comes to that picture there. You mentioned it in the pregame, the fast clock or the clock movement there. Definitely one of the fastest games. And then moving on to the first game, we'll continue this conversation on the other side of the break. But as I mentioned, 41-31, Ravens come out on top. This first quarter told a completely different tale between these two teams. I mean, honestly, we all expected it to be a little bit of a shootout, but we thought that they were just going to continue to score and respond and score and respond. And then at one point, halfway through the second quarter, it was all the Ravens from there. I feel like the Mike Evans injury probably started to take some air out of tires for the Tampa Bay Bucs. They were struggling to make some adjustments after that, even though they had the pieces to get a game going consistently. But trying to show up in the end of the fourth quarter just did not work. And then obviously that resulted in an injury for one of their key players. So, Tom, what'd you make of this, at least like the first half of this one, because we didn't get to talk about it at halftime?
Right, yeah, I would say the obvious notes are the Ravens covered. The game flew over the total, which was 50 or 51 and a half. We're seeing 70-plus points. Derrick Henry continuing to do his thing. Lamar was great. I was very, very adamant about Zay Flowers on the pregame show, and it just wasn't him. He got hurt. He ended up coming back in, but it seemed like he was playing a bit of a decoy role. Rashad Bateman has a huge game. Mark Andrews finally starting to get involved in the offense after a few slow weeks. So all good stuff from the Ravens, like they're just moving, but they did suffer the injury on defense to Marlon Humphrey. We have a lot to break down when it comes to the Bucs side of things after the break. So, their defense needs to figure things out, but the offense is where the big questions will lie.
Yeah, you can't crumble when anything changes in terms of momentum or one of your players going down. So Lamar Jackson closes out with 281 passing yards and 5 touchdowns. clean slate in that interception chapter. But as Tom mentioned, a lot to break down on the other side of the break. So continue to hang with us here on Pro Football Today, the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio here on SportsGrid. Make sure you're following us at SportsGrid over on X, and we'll catch you back on the other side of this break.
Guardians, despite being at home in the land, were a home underdog against Tarek Skubal. Enter Lane Thomas, maybe one of the under-the-radar trade deadline acquisitions being dealt from the Nationals. He was huge in the ALDS.
A heavy favorite for the New York Yankees in the series. You're going to look to their best two ball players to be those MVPs. That's Juan Soto and it's Aaron Judge.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
That kid on the two-point conversion play was wide open on the right side of the end zone, and the kid threw it about 15 rows over his head.
People crystallize Georgia and Alabama. They put them on the shelf above everyone else, and they're just not there this year. I thought the kid Beck was great on Saturday, but they barely beat Mississippi State, who is porous.
Pharrell coast to coast, only on SportsGrid.
But if you're playing the odds and you're looking for something that is a more favorable opportunity, it seems like Bo Naylor doing nothing tonight and just watching paint dry is a good investment.
I'm assuming he's in the bottom 3 or 4 of their lineup, which also puts him at risk to be pinch hit, which is great if you have that under. Gets up once or twice, and all of a sudden later in the game, they pinch hit for him, and then you're just free and clear.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into Pro Football Today. It's the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio, running through the Monday night doubleheader. In case you missed it, Ravens versus Bucks. Ravens on top 41-31. And then Chargers versus Cardinals. Cardinals come out by a narrow escape, 17-15, but they stuck to the script in terms of the low scoring. I was surprised to see a lot of passing. I was surprised to see Herbert's numbers, but a number of people were on the Cardinals for taking that one. And then before we cut to the break, Tom and I were discussing this Ravens versus Bucks game. Ravens offense looking very sharp, very clean, able to make a lot of way in this matchup. But Bucks defense just kind of crumbling there. Bucks offense kind of crumbling there. Trying to rally late in the fourth. It was a little too little, a little too late. Baker Mayfield closes out 370 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, which is just not going to pay off for this season. Rashad White being one of the heroes of this game, though. Not the 40 yards on the ground, but it's the 71 through the air and the 2 touchdowns that he was able to help accumulate for this team. And who led this room? It's K. Dotton, 100 receiving yards for the tight end through 8 receptions. No touchdowns quite yet. And then before the significant leg injury, Chris Godwin, 65 receiving yards through 7 receptions. So what did we make of this game on the Bucs offensive side, obviously, or the Bucs side as a whole, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, it starts off, Mike Evans has the touchdown. He ends up leaving. The hamstring is, I assume it's going to be some type of week-to-week thing since he already came into this game listed as questionable with the hamstring injury. There are reports, at least Adam Schefter tweeted that Godwin may be done for the season with the dislocated ankle. The running backs, obviously, I think this is going to be their strength moving forward. It's going to be a steady diet of the 3 running backs that they have, and then it's going to be K. Dotton. And then after that, it's going to be who steps up to fill some of the void if we do see Godwin out for the year and Mike Evans miss any amount of time and or Mike Evans plays, but he's not fully healthy. And ultimately, even if Mike Evans were fully healthy, they still need a number 2, wide receiver out there. So whether we're going to see Trey Palmer step up, whether it's going to be McMillan, Sterling Shepard does have some connection with Baker Mayfield dating back to college. So I think it's going to be what we've talked about for a lot of teams, where it's going to be like a number 1 option with Mike Evans, K-Dot in number 2, and then it's going to be a game-by-game basis where sometimes it's going to be Trey Palmer stepping up. Sometimes it's going to be Sterling Shepard, as you called the Sterling Shepard touchdown a couple weeks ago, a month ago, whenever it was, because he does have some connection with Baker. So, like, on a game-by-game basis, we can look for props of those secondary or tertiary options. I think the 3 running backs have to be the strength of the Bucs going forward if their passing game is not going to be at full strength. But Bucky Irving and Rachaad White are totally capable in the passing game. So I think they'll be okay. I'm not going to say great, but I think they'll be okay.
Yeah, and the offensive line will help a lot, so I wouldn't be surprised if it reverts to a little run heavy after that. But you mentioned it. Both guys are capable of also catching passes. Not to mention is that Trey Palmer being in the mix of this team preseason-wise, we've seen big connections between Baker Mayfield and Trey Palmer. There is trust there. I think that Palmer was probably being eased into the game plan coming off of injury and whatnot. So a number of opportunities there for a couple of guys. And then, Shepard versus the Falcons is kind of where I was taking that one. So we'll see how the Bucs have to adjust. A number of fans were kind of frustrated with some of the play calling in that fourth quarter as well. And just, again, Baker Mayfield can't turn over the ball. You can air out all day. You can hit these amazing statistics, but it's a number of quarterbacks in the league where you can't turn it over in equal measure to your success getting it down the field. Moving on from Monday Night Football, it's time to start looking ahead. If you guys joined Tom and I last night for the Pro Football Today post-game show, we started alluding to the Thursday night matchup going down. And Tom, you mentioned it being a spot where the Vikings can get back in the W column. They're taking on the Rams for Thursday night. Spread sitting at a 3, total sitting at 48.5. I know we're going to cut it close to the break here, but initial thoughts to get us going on this one.
The big news is that Cooper Kupp is fully expected to play for the Rams. It's obviously going to be a huge boost to their offense since he's been out. Puka Nacua is out, or has been out, and they've been missing the 2 of them. And it's really been the Kyren Williams show, plus how many of these secondary receivers can step up to fill a role, whether it's Tutu Atwell, whether it's Whittington, whoever it might be. But, seeing Kupp involved is going to be a big step for their offense. Largely, most interested in what the props are going to be, because I don't think the props are going to be worth going, at least on a short week for the Rams, going up against a good defense with the Vikings. So it may be a stay away as of now, and then we can move forward on a week-to-week basis. But I think the Vikings do rebound. They do come away with the win. I think the Rams are still a little bit too shorthanded, especially on the offensive line. So give me the Vikings at -3.
Yeah, good point. And even with them being shorthanded, we know they can keep games a little interesting. But regardless, I mean, the Vikings are the most complete team. They're coming off of a very, very, very narrow loss versus a great team in the nation right now. So don't go anywhere. We continue to unpack the upcoming Sunday slate here on SportsGrid.
Guardians, despite being at home in the land, were a home underdog against Tarek Skubal. Enter Lane Thomas, maybe one of the under-the-radar trade deadline acquisitions being dealt from the Nationals. He was huge in the ALDS.
A heavy favorite for the New York Yankees in the series. You're going to look to their best 2 ball players to be those MVPs. That's Juan Soto and it's Aaron Judge.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
That kid on the 2-point conversion play was wide open on the right side of the end zone, and the kid threw it about 15 rows over his head.
People crystallized Georgia and Alabama. They put them on the shelf above everyone else, and they're just not there this year. I thought the kid Beck was great on Saturday, but they barely beat Mississippi State, who is porous.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
But if you're playing the odds and you're looking for something that is a more favorable opportunity, it seems like Bo Naylor doing nothing tonight and just watching paint dry is a good investment.
I'm assuming he's in the bottom 3 or 4 of their lineup, which also puts him at risk to be pinch hit, which is great if you have that under. Gets up once or twice, and all of a sudden later in the game, they pinch hit for him, and then you're just free and clear.
Game time decisions. Only on SportsGrid.
Back at it with Pro Football Today, the post-game show with Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio. We talked about the Monday Night Football doubleheader and ran through those scores. Now it's time to look ahead. We started talking about the Vikings versus the Rams. Sounds like a clear lean towards the Vikings for a number of reasons, but good news for the Rams, as Tom said, with Cooper Kupp getting back into the mix there. Now, talking about another team we saw this weekend versus the Vikings specifically, the Detroit Lions will be hosting the Tennessee Titans. Spread sitting at 10.5. Total sitting at 45.5, but some news come in for the Lions being Jameson Williams being on a 2-game suspension. Is that what I saw there? Tom, talk to us about this one.
Yeah, this news came down in the middle of the games where, according to Adam Schefter, Jameson Williams is going to be suspended for 2 games for the performance-enhancing substances. I don't think he's going to be appealing this. He's been off to a good start this year. I'm not going to say great. But I think in the short term, this is a role that will be filled by Tim Patrick specifically, or Khalif Raymond. I think it's going to be Tim Patrick, though, for the Lions. Like I always talk about Jameson Williams being this downfield threat. And when it comes to a lot of offenses that are successful, what do I say? There's a player like Amon-Ra St. Brown who moves the chains. You have a running back coming out of the backfield who can catch it like Jahmyr Gibbs. You have a tight end getting up the seam. And then you have a big play threat with Jameson Williams. The Lions have check off every single box of something that you would want for an offense that is very well-rounded. They have a good run with Montgomery. So now this role, this big play threat with Jameson Williams is missing. Tim Patrick is going to fill that role. Now, it's not like he's out for the season. It's going to be 2 games. So we kind of have to jump on this early, capture the value that Tim Patrick brings over these two games, and then we may never get it again. So I'm just being really, really optimistic about Tim Patrick and hopefully nailing some props, some long props, because it's not like his yards are going to be up at 50. It's probably going to be in the mid-20s, and he can get this done in 2 catches. So I'm just optimistic.
Well, it's a good look ahead, and something that I do appreciate, and if you guys have missed Pro Football Today, the pregame show, this is a reason to watch. Tom, you're really good at noting either secondary players or players that will end up getting in the mix of certain games depending on who their opponent is. So it's something worth watching, especially when you're looking at great betting angles and trying to gauge the statistics. Now, just to add to what you said there, they are taking on the Titans next, which we know are kind of a dumpster fire team, so they'll be okay without Williams. Next will be the Packers. After them, though, a little bit of a tougher opponent, but still, game plan-wise, you can still strategize without him. Williams has contributed 17 receptions for 361 receiving yards thus far and 3 touchdowns. So taking all those numbers into mind, as well as that secondary guy or those roles that'll now open up in his absence, definitely good that you mentioned a guy that you have faith in and that you feel optimistic about. Kind of also looking at this matchup, I know there's not too much to say on terms of Tennessee, but where would you navigate maybe Jared Goff here? Because they don't have to come in too hot. They don't have to come in, blazing performance-wise when it comes to their defense. So maybe this is an option also in terms of maybe not going as run-heavy as normal, or what do you think we'll see out of Jared Goff?
Ultimately Goff could have a really modest game. If they're 10.5-point favorites, he doesn't need to throw for 300 yards. They should be controlling things. David Montgomery did leave the game over the weekend versus the Vikings briefly. He was helped off to the sideline by trainers. He did come back in. So as the week develops and we get the injury reports, I just want to make sure David Montgomery will be there and for a full workload, because if he's not, it's going to be a big Jahmyr Gibbs game. And they're 10.5-point favorites. So if Goff needs to throw for 300 yards, like something went wrong for the Lions in their game plan, because they should be controlling this from start to finish. Clean game. The Titans are terrible. Doesn't matter if it's Mason Rudolph. Doesn't matter if it's Will Levis. I think this will be a really easy game for the Lions after a huge emotional win 2 weeks ago against Dallas, this revenge game, and then a huge divisional game. I think this game's as straightforward as it possibly can be for the Lions.
Yeah, best way to put that. Straightforward game coming at the fans very, very soon here. Now for another game coming up on the docket, you got the Bills taking on the Seahawks. So many people were on the over for Geno Smith props. I think he closed out the day with 207 receiving yards in the previous game. But regardless, we've seen clean football out of Josh Allen. We've also seen the numbers and futures move for the Buffalo Bills. I believe division-wise, I saw the Bills on top at minus 800 earlier today. This matchup between the Bills and the Seahawks sitting at a 3 spread, total sitting at 47.5. How would we start looking at this one?
I want to say under, but I just don't know, especially with the Seahawks defense. They're up and down, going up against an offense led by Josh Allen. And we've spoken about the Seahawks. They start off a little bit slow, and then all of a sudden they come charging back. So I want to say under, because I think that's the play, especially across country, interconference. It doesn't really matter. And I think that means we're just going to see points, because these offenses want to get out and move. It's like not a super high priority game. It's like, this is not a divisional game where like we need to see the Seahawks buckle down and kind of get their defense back on the right track. Like, these offenses can get out and fly. Another week with Amari Cooper being worked into the system for the Bills. The one note is going to be with DK Metcalf, who popped up today saying that the report is that he has an MCL injury. So JSN, Jackson Smith and Jigba, is going to be the answer for the Seahawks. Of course, Tyler Lockett will be there to move the chains, but I think it will be JSN. I think Noah Fant could play a big role coming out of the middle of the field up the seam. I also think Zach Charbonnet will be a solid option for some intermediate passes coming out of the backfield, but JSN is probably the guy I'll trust the most.
Yeah, good point. And there's been notes that show that Charbonnet can be trusted to do more, but sometimes they don't lean into it as much. But like you said, while it might scream under, I feel like this is something that would end up going over. I mean, the number of touchdowns we know that the Bills can accumulate on top of what the Seahawks can potentially do in the second half, depending on what they stick to. Could be a number of things for points-wise. Another one, this could be interesting. Bears-Commanders, 2.5 spread, 44.5 on the total. We do have Jaden Daniels with a rib injury. I think I saw that he's week to week, if not day to day. So without one of the guys who have been most impressive in this offense for the Commanders, this game can be much more narrow than anticipated. So what are we leaning with on this?
I want to say Bears. I think the Bears are the right call now if Daniels doesn't play. We got to remember the Bears are coming off a bye week. They were in London previously, and Caleb Williams looked great in that London game against Jacksonville. So coming off a full rest, now going up against the Commanders, whose defense is bad, and we can't take what their defense did last week like really with any confidence, because it was the Panthers. Anyone can stop the Panthers. So I think the answer is the Bears at 2.5. If you're optimistic that Daniels does play, I think you should take the Commanders now at plus 2.5, because if he does get ruled in, that line's not going to stay the same at plus 2.5. It'll probably flip. So that's only if you're confident or have optimism that Daniels will end up playing. I personally prefer the Bears at taking them 2.5. I don't think they need to rush Daniels out there. I think they can let him kind of heal an extra week and then go from there.
And I think the hard part with Daniels in or without him in, the Bears defense can be surprising in matchups like this. I think that talent-wise, especially if Daniels is out of the mix, how they'll have to make adjustments, the Bears can probably be a surprising matchup in that category. Less than 2 minutes, so we'll continue it on the other side of the break. But Eagles, Bengals, 2.5 spread, 46.5 on the total. And this is going to be a challenging spot where I feel like we're going to see what the identity of both of these teams are in this matchup. I feel like it comes in equal enough. So what do you like here?
I'm the line at 2.5 when it opened yesterday. When I first saw it, I'm very surprised because the Bengals started off the year horrible and they've been slowly trending up. Their defense is still bad, and I wonder, like, does this line? And I keep asking myself. I said this to myself like yesterday when I saw these lines. Does this line tell us more about the Bengals and the books' trust in the Bengals that they're actually a good team and they just had some bad variance in the beginning of the season? Or does this line tell us more about the Eagles that they're not actually as good as we thought? Now, granted, they're coming off a big win, Saquon did, but again, that was against the Giants. We have to take that with a huge grain of salt. prior to that, they failed to cover against the Browns 2 weeks ago when they were 8.5-point home favorites, and the Browns were underdogs. And the Browns are horrible. So does this line tell us more about the Bengals, that they're actually a good team and they're actually going to be trending upwards? Or do we buy into the Eagles saying, hey, we should be taking points with the Eagles because the Bengals are actually frauds?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question, especially because the Bengals defense is just extremely concerning to me. So it's one of those defenses that can allow the Eagles in a little too much. But a number of games for Tom and I to still get to here on Pro Football Today. Don't go anywhere. Another quick break coming up here on SportsGrid.
Guardians, despite being at home in the land, were a home underdog against Tarek Skubal. Enter Lane Thomas, maybe one of the under-the-radar trade deadline acquisitions being dealt from the Nationals. He was huge in the ALDS.
A heavy favorite for the New York Yankees in the series. You're going to look to their best two ball players to be those MVPs. That's Juan Soto and it's Aaron Judge.
The early line, only on SportsGrid.
That kid on the two-point conversion play was wide open on the right side of the end zone, and the kid threw it about 15 rows over his head.
People crystallized Georgia and Alabama. They put them on the shelf above everyone else, and they're just not there this year. I thought the kid Beck was great on Saturday, but they barely beat Mississippi State, who is porous.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
But if you're playing the odds and you're looking for something that is a more favorable opportunity, it seems like Bo Naylor doing nothing tonight and just watching paint dry is a good investment.
I'm assuming he's in the bottom 3 or 4 of their lineup, which also puts him at risk to be pinch hit, which is great if you have that under. Gets up once or twice, and all of a sudden later in the game, they pinch hit for him, and then you're just free and clear.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome back into Pro Football Today, the post-game show. Kasey Hudson and Tom Vecchio here on SportsGrid. We had a Monday night matchup between the Ravens and the Bucks. Ravens get the victory there. Chargers and Cardinals. Cardinals walk away with the victory. So now Tom and I are running through the upcoming slate. We went through Thursday night football. Now we're on Sunday. We're talking about the Bears versus the Commanders. We were talking about the Eagles versus the Bengals. And Tom presented a great question. Does this 2.5 spread and 46.5 total tell us more about the Bengals or tell us more about the Eagles? Something you can chat with us about over on social. That's at SportsGrid. But before we went to the break, I was just saying how much the Bengals defense kind of concerns me. We saw the Eagles have that narrowish escape from the Browns, but I feel like the Bengals are probably like that much better in a sense of consistency. Not to offend the Bengals, but I feel like this is a spot where we'll figure out what the Eagles actually can deliver. They've got some strong pieces on defense, so I feel like they outmatch the Bengals, but the Bengals have started to kind of solve some things as of late. So how would you even engage this game on the spread and the total?
I want to say the Eagles. I think that is the side that I'm like most interested in, and I would say in theory most confident in, just because again, what they're looking good. We have to take the last 2 games in context against the Giants and the Browns, like 2 of the worst teams in the league. But I think they're starting to figure things out. Obviously, there's a ton to say about their play calling on offense and what they're doing. But if Saquon is going to be this good and he can run for 100 yards and they still have they got A.J. Brown back, they got Devontae Smith back, they're both fully healthy. If we have seen the Bengals defense that is get torn apart by opposing offenses, dating back to the game we did with against the Commanders with Jaden Daniels. Like, the Eagles should be scoring in this matchup. They really, really should be scoring. And there's this stat out there from last week that they're the only team that hasn't scored in the first quarter or whatever it is, dating back X amount of opening drives in first quarter. So it may actually be Eagles' second half team total because they don't know what to do in the first quarter. So the second half team total and Eagles plus 2.5, I think that's more of a lean right now than an actual pick.
Ooh, I like that actually quite a bit. But good point on that. That's why I feel like it's going to probably tell us more about the Eagles at the end of the day. They have the ability to be better on both sides of the ball. That's the way I like to look at that one. Yeah. All right, production, this one's for you. We got Green Bay Packers taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. 4.5 spread, 49.5 total. Jaguars probably feeling themselves a little bit after what was it, a double-digit win over the Patriots. It doesn't tell you a lot. They hung out in London for a week and a half, 2 weeks' time, but you got the Packers that are really starting to piece their game together and have all of the tools to make this one a lot more interesting than that 4.5 spread is kind of indicating, in my personal opinion. What do you think, Tom?
I'm always interested why teams that come back from London or come back from any overseas game don't opt to take the bye week, the week that they come back, because the teams do have that option. Like the Jets didn't take it, the Bears did take it, and the Vikings took it when they came back. And if we have all this confidence in the Packers and we think the Jags are a bad team, why is this line only 4.5? Granted, it's an away game for the Packers. But if we just saw Caleb Williams 2 weeks ago tear apart the Jags defense, Jordan Love should be throwing for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns in this game, and Josh Jacobs should be running all over them. Drake May, a rookie on his second week in an overseas game, just threw for 274 and 2 touchdowns. Jordan Love is going to dismantle the Jags this weekend. Love the Packers. I want a Packers love same game parlay, 300 yards, the money line, the spread, you name it. It's go Pack go. I'm going to buy a cheesehead and wear it for Sunday.
I thought you were going to say love Pack love, because it's hard to say love the Packers and then you're on for love. But it's a lot of love for the Packers overall, and I'm right there with you. I just thought it was slightly disrespectful to have a 4.5 spread versus the Jaguars coming back from being in London, coming back from being there for 2 weeks. I mean, they were over there for some time, not taking the bye. Packers kind of heating up here in terms of getting guys healthy again, getting their system piece together. So that was pretty wild to me. Now, we've got a lot of fans in New York that are feeling some type of way about the Jets. They don't know where to gauge them. They're not going to be as lost hope in terms of saying that they're going to fall short to the Patriots, but spread sitting at 7, total sitting at 41.5. Now, considering what the Jets should be able to do offensively, this total feels a little low. Am I kind of overreading this here, Tom?
I think the total is fine. I mean, again, what are we talking about here? The Pats, their defense is atrocious. They're coming back from London. They're another team that didn't choose to take the bye. They're coming. I don't want to lay 7 points with the Jets. Like, whoa, what have we seen from them? I don't want to lay 7 points, but the Pats are terrible. Like, they're deep. Like, again, what did I just say? The Jags and Trevor Lawrence, a team that we have no confidence in, just put up 30 whatever points, and Tank Bigsby ran all over the Pats in London with 2 touchdowns over 100 yards. Breece Hall should be having 100 yards in this game. The Jets should be covering. But the point I will always make to people is there are a lot of games every week. You don't have to bet every one. Now, if you're in a pick 'em pool like I am, like you have to pick every game, I think I have to pick the Jets because I'm not going with the Pats. But man, if you are just betting, you want to choose some games that you like, you don't have to bet this game. Don't watch this game. It's a 41.5 over under with teams we don't like watching. So maybe a Breece Hall action in some props, but man, there are better games on the weekend slate.
Maybe a moment of discipline for all of us from a betting perspective, because
don't have to bet every game. Don't do like a whatever it is, like a 15 game parlay to try and hit every game. Just from a viewing perspective and actually good teams, I mean, Vikings Rams starts the week off great. I wish Jaden Daniels was playing because Bears Commanders would be awesome. But I mean, Eagles Bengals actually has good teams that are fully healthy. Just bet on that game. Don't bet on the Pats and the Jets.
Yeah, maybe jump in there and just take a gander on what the yardage looks like for Devontae Adams and Hall and how well
Yeah, sure.
Aaron Rodgers is doing. That's the most action that game needs, is just to kind of see where the bar stands after that loss to the Steelers. But most importantly, you can always get these thoughts, these opinions, and when you join us here on Pro Football Today for either the post-game show with Tom and myself, that's going to be Monday, Thursday, and Sunday, or for the pre-game show. That's when we get you ready for all things going down. And as Tom mentioned, coming up on Thursday, we've got the Minnesota Vikings taking on the Los Angeles Rams, and so much to get into. And it's a great time when you get to hang out with us on Pro Football Today for the pre-game show. It's me, Tom, Dave, and Adam. And most importantly, you get the in-game live crew and so much more. So I'll remind you yet again on this Monday night, make sure you're following SportsGrid over at SportsGrid, as well as all of us. And we'll continue to bring you the NFL coverage as the season continues to roll here on SportsGrid.
Can't sometimes look at the point spreads and just, understand what they mean. Because going into the game, you're looking at it, it's like, okay, Denver's playing better football. They won a couple in a row. Now they're going back home.
The Broncos have to turn around and play on a short week. Sean Payton is returning to New Orleans. The Saints just gave up almost 600 yards of offense to the Buccaneers. So it's going to be interesting kind of gut check.
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
But if you're playing the odds and you're looking for something that is a more favorable opportunity, it seems like Bo Naylor doing nothing tonight and just watching paint dry is a good investment.
I'm assuming he's in the bottom 3 or 4 of their lineup, which also puts him at risk to be pinch hit, which is great if you have that under. Gets up once or twice, and all of a sudden later in the game, they pinch hit for him, and then you're just free and clear.
Game time decisions, only on SportsGrid.
That kid on the two-point conversion play was wide open on the right side of the end zone, and the kid threw it about 15 rows over his head.
People crystallized Georgia and Alabama. They put them on the shelf above everyone else, and they're just not there this year. I thought the kid Beck was great on Saturday, but they barely beat Mississippi State, who is porous.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Welcome to SportsGrid. It's been a heck of a week here at the network. Here are some of what you might have missed this week. Jeff Ulbrich takes over. So 2 things here. The move for you, did it make sense? And also, what is the chance of an interim coach becoming the head coach if things work out this season?
Donnie, good question. So I look, when the news broke, I was like, whoa. They were not, no one's expecting this. And I checked in with the coaches weren't expecting it. The owner, Woody Johnson, does a lot of things on his own. He has opinions and he doesn't share them usually from what I'm told. So he made that move. But this is why I think it actually made sense. Another coach gave this to me from another team, and he made a very good point when it comes to Jeff Ulbrich. If you're going to do it, you don't do it when there are like 2 or 3 weeks left. It's not enough time to get an evaluation of an interim head coach. You're giving Jeff Ulbrich, Donnie, the majority of the season to get this thing the right way. Now, if they win Monday night, they technically have a lead. They have the tiebreaker, the first one, which is head-to-head over the Bills. Of course, they play Week 17. And we'll see if that would actually matter by then. But, look, it is early. I know it shocked a lot of people. Seemingly came out of nowhere. But they're another team that underachieved. In fact, Woody Johnson said it to the media this week. They have high expectations. Everyone around the Jets that I've spoken with, and I was with the team, when they had to join practice with the Giants. They clearly said playoffs are not only on their mind, they're expecting it. And there's a lot of season left, and they still have a good chance to do it. But they've underachieved so far. It's not their defense. It's their passing game, obviously, and the running game under Breece Hall. So I'm interested to see what Todd Downing, the new offensive coordinator, was actually, he has the same title, passing game coordinator / quarterbacks coach, but he's going to call the plays. And he's called a running game before. He coached Derrick Henry for 2 years and also coached under Jack Del Rio with the Raiders, where they really wanted to run the football.
In the last minute, huge breaking news in the National Football League from NFL Network's Ian Rappaport. The Raiders are completing a trade of star wide receiver Davante Adams to the Jets. Back with his old pal Aaron Rodgers as Las Vegas moves on. What the trade compensation is, that remains to be seen at this point. But the reunion of Aaron Rodgers and Davante Adams seems to be taking place for the New York Jets. Wow. What a move. 2-4, sub 500. Joe, this Jets team cannot avoid headlines. If there is drama, if there is notoriety, if there is attention, it really circulates on one place. That is East Rutherford, New Jersey, or Florham Park, New York, where the facility is located. What was rumored and perhaps speculated, but seemed as though it was a long shot of actually happening. Joe Douglas and the Jets get it done, bringing back Davante Adams with his former quarterback in Green Bay, now both playing in New York. The Jets are trading with the Raiders for Davante Adams. This news breaking in the last minute and a half.
For a conditional third-round pick. That's basically what the Raiders got in return, a conditional third-round pick. They didn't have to give up Mike Williams. They didn't have to give up anything else, it looks like. A conditional third-round pick for Davante Adams, which makes sense why we're now also hearing in the last hour that the Jets have given Hassan Reddick's people now permission to seek a trade. Right. Why? Because you got to inherit Davante Adams' contract now, and when he reports, all of that money that they're going to work on is also going to be towards the cap here. So all of it is starting to come together. But again, does Davante Adams move the needle on our public question today? The answer is absolutely not. It doesn't. But the fact that they only had to give up a conditional third, that's impressive.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I look to New York first. And a new play caller, not a new offensive coordinator, but a new play caller in Todd Downing, who last time we saw him, he tends to hand the ball off quite a bit. So I'm thinking it might be a good time to be buying on Breece Hall. Breece Hall is a guy that people drafted as anywhere from a top 3 pick to a first rounder. And he's been disappointing this year. Let's just call it what it is. Things have not gone well, but I don't know if it's all Breece Hall's fault. We saw Braylon Allen get a ton of work there. We saw Breece Hall be limited to a max of 16 rushing attempts in a game. Now, he's still getting targets in this offense. That's cool. It's just not enough. I mean, I want to see this guy carry the ball 20 times in the game. I want to see this guy earn that check. He's got 2 touchdowns on the year. He has just 197 yards. Just to put that in perspective, a couple weeks ago, Matt, Derrick Henry had 199 in one game.
Good stuff. We're just getting started. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.